Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Buckle Up, an ultra running conversation. This week's guest is Neal Palles. I've been following Neal for a long time. Neal has been around in the space for quite a long time. He is an ultra running coach, a psychotherapist, and a performance coach as well. And he has a lot of great feedback for us this week on the episode. Just a little update with me. I am sports and performance psychology program through ASU Online. And this semester, summer semester, I loaded up in classes knowing that I was going to have surgery on my Achilles. And I wanted to get a lot of credits done because I knew I wouldn't be training as much as I would like to be. Along with those classes came this semester's assignment. One of my assignments is to change a habit or create a good one. And I thought getting back to training would be one of those habits. My professor, Dr. Hita, encouraged us to challenge ourselves and do a little work in doing something better for ourselves. And so it's a project. I actually thought it was going to be kind of easy. I'm an athlete. I have been training for a long time. I have been off of my feet for about 10 weeks due to the surgery. So I thought it would be a return to sport. I agreed to 45 minutes a day of some sort of active movement, one rest day a week, eating a little bit healthier. And it's proven to be pretty challenging. I don't know how I had all this time in the past to train, but I'm squeaking it out right now. I'm still in the game. I still have one day a week off, and I'm shifting a little bit too. Instead of 45 minutes a day, I added up 45 times 6 to come out with a little more than 4.5 hours of training a week, and just taking that as the average. I still am trying to get out for 5 to 6 days a week, and I'm trying to do more than 4.5 hours in that week, and I've been successful at that so far. I actually have stayed to 6 days so far, but just in case, if I needed an extra rest day, I have been going longer than 45 minutes on most of my days already, so that's the slight adjustment. But otherwise, yeah, it's proven to be pretty good. I'm creating good habits again. I'm getting moving. Some days it's a little bit of run walking, but most days it's been cycling for me. Get back into shape and get moving. And I'm enjoying the process. I'm hoping that I score some extra credit points for this, and wish me luck. Without further ado, here's our episode with Neal Palles. I hope you enjoy.
Miles of dust beneath your feet, another sunrise you will meet, pushing past the weary climb, leaving doubts and fears behind. Hear the trail call out your name, ignite that inner hopeful flame for the journey and the view, and that shiny buckle too. Buckle up, let's start the show.
Neal Palles, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to sit down and talk with me. I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time, following your journey, always kind of just poking around, seeing what you're up to, and trying to take some sound advice from all the hats that you wear. You just share with me offline all the hats that you wear. So thanks again for showing up.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, how you found yourself doing this?
That's a big question. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very honored, that you followed me, so I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. So I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a psychotherapist, and I have been for, I have to do the math sometimes, definitely over 25 years. So, where are we now? 26 years, 28 years I've been in the field of mental health. And I have always had this, burn inside of me for the performance side of mental health and combining the two. Early on, even as far back as high school, I became fascinated with the mountains and mountaineering. And I wondered, what it was, the psychology of mountaineering. I wrote a paper called The Psychology of Mountaineering in high school, and little did I know where I would end up. I followed a path after high school, guiding in the mountains, instructing in the mountains for a program called Outward Bound. Worked with kids 16, 17, 18 years old, and even adults in the mountains in 23-day programs or even up to 30-day programs in Oregon, California, and here in Colorado. Came back, in the middle of that career and said, what else am I going to do? And I said, I'm going to become a therapist. I went back to school in social work, graduated in social work, worked for an employee assistance program in behavioral health for a long time, and said, I really want to follow this path of applied sports psychology, this mental performance piece. Had an opportunity to go back to graduate school in 2016, and then started building my practice, doing performance, mental performance, and psychotherapy. So it could be someone who has experienced injury, some sort of setback. It could be depression. Could have been grief, a loss, some trauma. Working specifically in therapy realm, or I could put my hat on and deal specifically with a performance issue. And they're two separate hats. I can combine them a little bit in the mental health side. On the mental performance side, I kind of wear just that hat. Keep those separate. Third hat I wear is I'm a coach. I love running. I fell in love with it. I started, taking courses, on running, how to coach runners back in 2008, 2009, started digging into the exercise physiology part of it. And then started coaching some athletes, and then started working for Carmichael Training Systems. So I do that completely separate from my therapy and mental performance practice. And it is like absolutely the coolest thing in the world to be able to do all three things and wear these different hats in my life. And it just that I have this able to balance this. And sometimes it's juggling plates, but it's this great experience where I get to work with athletes and see them do incredible things outside and inside of themselves, and overcome a lot of difficult terrain.
I love it. I'm here for it all, Neal. And I think that's why I follow you. We followed a bit of the same trajectory. I'm probably 20 years later, not older by any means, but just 20 years behind you. I've been coaching for a minute.
Right.
And I just recently jumped into ASU's online sports and psychology
I saw
program.
Yep.
So I'm so excited. That's why I think obviously that's not obvious, but that's why I do follow you, because you're kind of like helping me along the processes of all the things I want to do. And I feel like there's a little bit of overlap in all of it, right? There's maybe three hats, but they're all a shade of red or something along that line, right?
There's, there is one hat informs the other, and it's nice. In my therapy realm, I could wear that mental performance hat, and I could do a little bit more mental performance work in that therapy space. But when someone comes to me in that therapy space and they've been, they're an ultra runner, a trail runner, or they're a 5K runner, I know what they're talking about. I know what their training looks like. I know what it should look like, and I know the resources that are connected in that community. And then over here on the coaching side, I could have an athlete who's going through a lot in their life, and I understand what that's like. And that isn't just this, oh, you'll get over it. No, this is stuff that's going on in their lives, and we have to adjust the training plan accordingly, and so all these hats inform one another. And it's really cool to be able to understand where people are coming from in the coaching space, in mental health, mental performance. I'm able to use my mental performance hat in my coaching space. Obviously, I can't just turn that off. I'm going to talk to people about self-talk and motivation in that, and then I could just wear that hat separately and just work with someone who just wants to work on the mental performance of either ultra running or trail running, rock climbing. I've worked with fly fishermen, volleyball athletes, soccer players, lacrosse athletes. I mean, it's such a wide range, and it's really good, and just to share with you is don't narrow yourself down just to one thing. Be open to experiencing all different kinds of sports, because you get to see different points of view. I've worked with equestrian, which is really like, I never thought equestrian. Fly fishing, I never thought fly fishing, but coming in for mental performance work, which is really fascinating, and it was really, we were able to see a development in that performance by developing some of those skills. So it applies to a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think, Neal, just to kind of piggyback on that, I believe, like, for me, I have a bunch of athletes that are doing different disciplines, right? And like, if I was just focused on the 100-mile ultra run, like it's all I did, I could kind of get like the horse blinders on, right? But then I work with a triathlete, I work with the alpinist, right? And I start to see things in those guys' training plans that kind of like inform how I might start programming for somebody else's next 100 miler. I might change a little bit of the thought process, because I'm just absorbing more information, right? And I'm getting different perspectives from different sports, and I'm applying them across the board, back and forth, right?
Yeah. Physiology, when we talk about the physiology with that hat on, I mean, it applies to everybody. That doesn't change, right? And so we could apply all that. And then definitely the mental performance piece, it applies. And it applies, to working with people with like executives and, and professionals. who may not be ultra runners. Although for me, I have a little harder going into that realm. Having worked in business, in for insurance industry for a long time, I kind of steer clear of it. So
You've noted before that athletic performance depends heavily on solid foundational mental health. Where do you see athletes confuse like this mental toughness that we see so much online and in sport with just suppressing deeper issues like anxiety or burnout?
yeah, so I think that it's a misconception that we can silo everything, right? We may have seen people. Well, we get that expectation. We've got that expectation from our coaches growing up. Early coach. I want to say early coaches. More modern coaches are starting to understand. I think there's still a lot that has to be learned.
I might even add in like a parents, right? Like that.
Definitely,
like the parents from the sidelines screaming at the kid, like
no, screaming at the kid, yelling at the kid. I mean, I do my best, when my daughter's running cross country, to back off and just sit down, and go, and bite my tongue and know that she's learning as she goes, and that's really part of the experience for her. But we get it from our parents, we get it from social media, we get it from our coaches. Just deal with it, toughen up. I wrestled, my freshman year of high school, and it was about being tough. There was no, wow, you're struggling in school too. Let's understandable that you might have to spend a little bit more time focusing on that, and that it was about toughen up. It was, and that's the mentality that a lot of people still grow up with and don't understand that we are emotional beings. We have feelings. We have this nervous system, and it's all connected. That nervous system, head down to our toe, that, hey, if I am experiencing a stress in school or at home, that's going to affect my performance on the field. It's going to affect my performance in the mountains. As much as I try to compartmentalize it, I can't compartmentalize it. I have to deal with it. And so this has to come first. I'll get a lot of inquiries, people coming to me, and they'll say, I really want to work on this mental toughness piece. I want to come out to this race and just drive. And then I'll find out that really this isn't a mental performance client. This is there might be more of a mental health issue going on. Maybe depression, maybe, identity issues, regarding performance. It could be, the pressure they put on themselves, the self-doubt, this fear of failure, this fear of letting other people down. That isn't necessarily just mental performance. That is mental health. This anxiety that, they may come in and say, well, I want to work on this anxiety at the race. Well, it turns out there's anxiety at home too. These don't go away when you head out and start climbing up Hope Pass. It's still there. Maybe you can compartmentalize a little bit, but it's still going to be there. But it is a weight. It's like a backpack that you're putting on, and that is going to hold you back. But the more you could start uncovering some of that and dealing with that in a way that's healthy, then you're going to perform so much better. So that's why it comes first. Just like your physical health. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of see like the compartmentalization of it. Like I think our concepts, or some of our concepts, or our current social media content creators have this thought process that it's like these separate buckets, and we're able to like just pick and choose when they are. But really the reality is that it's like one big bucket, right? So everything gets piled into it. The physical stress of training, the stress of life around us, the stress of work, the lack of sleep, the busyness of our lives in the 21st century, like all of it piles up, right?
The stuff you carry on from childhood, doesn't, some of that, unless you've addressed it and dealt with some of that, doesn't go away, and it's going to appear in different ways. These memories, I like to think of these memories as charged memories, right? And we react to a situation in the current lives in a lot of ways, because a lot of reason, the big reason is because of some of that charged stuff early on. And if we could unlearn some of that, or really reframe some of that and refocus, or I just say break down some of that, just, make that charge a little less powerful is another way to say it. So it's not pushing you around right now. So you're not pushed around by those high performance, pressures, and you're able to have high standards, but not push yourself to the brink.
I love it. No, Neal, I love it. I want to talk a little bit about acceptance and commitment therapy. What
Okay.
is it, and why is it uniquely suited for endurance athletes?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'm glad you asked it. So acceptance commitment therapy has been around probably, I think, since the late 80s, and it was designed by a doctor by the name of Stephen Hayes, and I think there may have been somebody else with him on this. And the idea is that we, simply learn how to accept our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, and commit to action, commit to valued action. And, not just any action, but our valued action. How do I want to show up today for myself, others, and the world around me? And the acceptance piece doesn't mean just giving into it. It means opening up to it. This is the big piece that people get wrong. It's like, I don't want to accept that. I don't want to, accept that this is happening in my life. No, but you're accepting that you're having the thought. You're just having the thought. These are normal. Our thoughts are normal. Our emotions, all emotions are normal. These feelings are normal. When we open up to that, and then we get this space to go, okay, I'm going to be present with that, and I'm going to make this choice to go up that hill and push harder. That's how it's really good for athletes. It's like, yeah, you're going to show up to the World Series nervous. That's normal. But how do you want to perform? How do you want to be behaving in that situation? All right, I'm going to go and do this. You could show up having this feeling of low confidence, and you could still perform really, really, really well by taking those steps and those actions necessary. So that's how I view acceptance commitment therapy being really helpful for athletes, and definitely ultra runners, and then for everybody in a wide range of different areas for sure. I was thinking about this. I saw this. Someone had posted on social media that they said sports psychologists, just want you to push down these thoughts. And I was like, that could have been further from the truth, and this is somebody who's kind of dabbling in mental performance, but hasn't been trained in mental performance, and definitely not familiar with acceptance and commitment therapy. And it doesn't understand it as, yeah, we're opening up to this stuff. You're going to feel it. Doesn't mean you have to react to it. When we react in ways that are unhelpful and moving away from our values, those are the things we don't want to be doing. We don't want to be, we're getting hooked up. Well, taking a DNF or DNS because of the feelings that are coming up. We could still respond to that in a helpful way. We could also don't want to move towards overtraining too, which people can tend to do when they have these feelings of self-doubt. I don't think I've done enough. That self-doubt is pushing you around. Now I'm going to move towards something to get rid of that feeling that is unhelpful by overtraining. And then you just repeat that cycle.
Then you get looped into the cycle for sure.
Yeah.
I love the definition of the acceptance and commitment therapy. I wanted to touch on that's super helpful for the guy at mile 70, but how can we practice that in training, along the way before mile 70? How can we start incorporating that into our long training run on Saturday afternoon?
I've incorporated in the idea of doing intervals. Depending on your progression, everyone has a different progression, and I'm not arguing right or wrong. It's like when you're doing intervals, think about them as mental intervals too. So you're doing a hard interval with a perceived of exertion at 9 or 10. That's hard. Your mind is going to push you. It's going to tell you to slow down. It's going to tell you this hurts. Open up to it. Listen to it. Do what matters anyways. It doesn't mean you're going to hit the pace. The outcome we can't control, right? We can't control the finish. We can't control if something happens on the course, but we can control your effort on in that moment and opening up to that discomfort in those intervals. So you're doing that. Typically, when I set up intervals, I'm doing those months and months in advance because that's least specific, and then I move towards the most specific. And so I'm doing that, and I'm going, okay, we're going to start here with those intervals. Maybe I'll add this layer of self-talk to it too. It's like, okay, what can we practice in the self-talk? Because that is what I call a towards move too. It's like, hey, let's find this motivational statement or instructional self-talk that resonates with you and you believe, and we could use that as well. When things get tough in those 3-4 minute intervals, and it's really intense. And then later on, when you're doing, last year, I think, before Leadville, I did 2 by 20 minute steady state efforts going up Hope Pass.
All right.
It hurt. And it was just about opening up to that discomfort. It was opening up to that discomfort because I knew during the race it's going to be 10 times as more uncomfortable. And that's key. And so you can
half as fast, right? Half as fast.
And half as fast. It's half as fast. And so, by layering this stuff in, and it's not just, acceptance, there's a lot of tools, I say this, but there's different pieces of this acceptance. It's what I call cognitive diffusion. So it's being able to get perspective on these thoughts and feelings and seeing from what they are, thoughts and feelings of like clouds in the sky. I'm getting perspective on it. And then, but it's also opening up to it. It's like, I'm here with this emotion. I'm experiencing this emotion right now. So it's very, very much a mindfulness based motive psychotherapy that really they call the third generation of cognitive behavioral therapy, where it's now we're using mindfulness. Now we're able to get perspective on this stuff. We're not trying to push it away. Every time we try to push something away, it's going to pop back up. It's going to pop back up. Instead, I'm just going to lightly carry it and be curious about it. So, this is what's going on. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it.
And so just like an interval workout, I've been at that interval level in past seasons. I just recently had surgery on my foot, so I'm not doing intervals currently. But in past seasons, I've been at that interval level. I prescribed intervals for my athletes. And if we're putting this the mental challenge into it as well during the training, and maybe we're not successful in this particular day's workouts of interval strength training in our mindful strength training. We just got to come back to it next week and try again, right? And see if we can push a little bit farther and a little bit farther.
The next day. So you do the workout, I'll have people, write down what worked, what didn't work on the mental side, but note it and, look at it. And then here's the deal is you got to close it. You go on to the next and you practice it again and you practice it again and you practice it again. Oh, hey, Neal, and this is where journaling is so helpful for athletes. I've talked to so many athletes who come to me initially and they've never journaled in their life. Like you've been running cross country for years and years and you didn't write down, and I know it happens. I know it happens, but just write it down, write down what you're thinking. And then, okay, did it work? Did it not work? Okay, let's edit it and fix it and go back and try it again next week. And the week after that, and the week after that. And you're taking these mental reps in addition to your physical reps. But remember, the other layer of this is being compassionate with yourself. Okay, it didn't work out. Great. Mm-hmm. Be kind to yourself, because not beating yourself up isn't going to work, because then you're just carrying that with you too on top of this other stuff. And that's just more energy you don't need to waste. So being kind to yourself, you close the book, you learn from it, you look around. Every one of us experiences this. It's real, you experience it, I experience it. Okay, it's this common humanity that we have, this mindful approach. We close that, compassionate ourselves, we go on to the next workout and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And it's not easy. And it's hard and it's challenging, but when you start to practice it, you start to get into that rhythm. And honestly, the best athletes in the world have that practice dialed down. They're the ones who are journaling. They look at it, and I forget the name of the decathlete who did that, but I remember he came to a coach with like a booklet of his journal. Like this is what I had done. And he was like one of the best athletes in the world. So, but yeah.
That's the old saying, right? Like the best time to start journaling was 20 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's right now. Right now.
The second best time is right now.
Yeah. The second best time is right now. Yeah. Take advantage of it.
You've mentioned Leadville. I've been to Leadville a bunch of times. It's an iconic race, right? And everyone wants to get into it. Everyone wants to do it. It's probably in the top 5, top 10 and the country right now. We just live it off. So you and I might be a little biased. We do live on either side of Leadville in Colorado. So close to home. Yeah, we love our Leadville. I've stood on the starting line before, and I've stood at the back at the very top end of the street. I don't know, the easternmost side of 6th Street, right there on Harrison Avenue at 4 a.m. or 3:55, I guess. And I've looked down the road and I've seen the 800 runners or 750 that are starting with me every morning. And I thought, gosh, like, how am I going to be the 45% that is successful today? How am I going to differentiate myself from the 65% DNF rate of this particular race?
It's a
And
hard race.
by just acknowledging it, I feel like I'm aware. I'm a little more aware of it. But
Yeah.
what is your suggestion in like the mental side of Leadville specifically, maybe as an example, maybe not specifically?
Yeah. Is don't get caught up in the hype, because the hype could get you in trouble. So I think that for even definitely my first years, you caught up in the hype, and you're out, and you're running, and you end up running too fast. But you have to run fast enough to get through some of those cutoffs. But know what that is, know what that feels like at that effort. But more than not getting caught up in the hype is going back to this idea of doing what matters. And this has really become a highlight for me, is knowing what it looks like, what that process looks like, not getting caught up in the outcome. If you get caught up in the outcome that only 45% finish, it's going to be a struggle. If you get caught up by that guy who's coming up next to you, we're going to get cut off. That's not going to help you. You have to do what matters. And that includes, redirecting your attention and your focus on things like your effort, your nutrition, your hydration, making things as simple as possible for you, because you're at a high altitude. You're not going to think perfectly up there, and you're expending yourself for over close to 30 hours. For some people, under 24, people close to 30. You have to redirect your focus to know when you're getting pushed around by the hype, by the outcome, by the intensity, by the sensations, and redirect it to what matters. That might be getting in and out of aid stations quickly, knowing exactly what you need and going. It's we talk about, as coaches, we talk about the process. Really, that's what it is. It's these actions, these behaviors that you're taking. You're going to when you get caught up in that loop of, oh my God, this is really hard. Notice it, name it, normalize it. Everyone here is kind of experiencing this, and then do what matters. Redirect your attention to your effort, your intensity, getting that gel in you, getting fueled, and get moving. And I'll say this for every ultra runner, is like, really, this is the process, is, focus, redirect your attention to doing what matters, but not trying to force this stuff down. No, it's going to come up, it's going to pop up, and then keep going. I don't know if that's helpful or not. You finished Leadville a couple times too. So, that's, when it came down to it, every race that I have finished, it was being about being a machine and just doing my job. When I have DNF'd, it's a lot of times sometimes it's physical, sometimes, and we have to accept that sometimes it is just physical, that, either there's difficulty in preparation or something physically has gone wrong, and that we have to be open to that. We can't, run around with a broken leg, or a hip that has a labral tear in it that is not working right, or, that plantar fasciitis that just ripped your soul open. You have to be mindful of that, but, and that's where the self-compassion comes in too. It's like, there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. Go out and have a good day by doing what matters.
I love that, Neal. I love the idea, especially specifically Leadville. Again, I mentioned 65% some years, or 55% some years of DNF rate. So inevitably, somebody's going to be a DNFer at Leadville, specifically. I use Leadville because I love it, but also because it does have such a high, because it has such a high DNF rate compared to other events. Most of the time. And so, like, how do we unpack the DNF? I've also DNF'd at Leadville on a couple occasions as well. I went home at mile 40. I went home at mile 50. 2 separate years, obviously. But how do we take that experience and grow from it, as opposed to like just having this stain and this bad taste in our mouth about a DNF in general, and specifically at Leadville?
First of all, just knowing, first being open to grieving, being sad, being frustrated, set yourself some limits. It's okay, I'm going to look at this and hold on to this for 24 hours, 48 hours, but be compassionate with yourself. We all DNF for the reason we DNF is the reason we DNF in that moment. And it's a moment in time of your big lifetime. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to DNF again.
Mm.
I've DNF. I can't even begin to tell you how many times on that course I've DNF'd. And I've had success, great success, where it's like, whoa, how did that, it's just, you have this great day, and then, and that's all doing lead challenge. So it's just this added layer of stuff that you're doing. And so I'll say is that self-compassion and acceptance is key. Because if you get pushed around by this stuff, it's going to beat you up for months and months and months. Holding yourself kindly lets you get back up. Lets you get back up and say, you know what? I'll go 48 hours. Okay, yeah, that sucked. I'm going to write down, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what I'm going to do differently, and, and start marching towards the next season. I did lead challenge last year. It was like, I got to do something on the bike. The bike is my issue. That's where I just get beat up. And then if you get beat up on the bike, you're going to get beat up on the run easily. And so, looking at that, it's okay. What do I have to do? Well, I have to take time off of it too, because I was also getting burnt out. I'd get to the starting line. And this is something to recognize is if you're getting to the starting line all grumpy, chances are you're burnt out already, And so I was getting burnt out. So I'm taking it, I'm saying, I said 2 years to my wife, and now I'm starting to go, well, maybe it's just a year, to go back to that. But it's, again, what to experience that DNF is to feel the emotions, to accept the emotions, and take that next step with self-compassion. What would your coach say to you? What would what would you say to a friend? What are you going to say to a friend if they DNF? Are you going to tell them they suck? No, you're not. Hopefully not. And that's, and unfortunately, that's a reality we live in on social media. There's going to be people like that, but your good friends are not going to tell you that. Be kind to yourself, take that next step, be mindful and get perspective on it, and then close the chapter in 48 hours. Take that next step and it's all right. We're on to the next thing. This is one moment in time. That is it. That is it. Leadville's got this lottery, but there's all sorts of ways to get in it if you want to really get in it. So, there's definite, you'll get back there. It's not going anywhere. And if anything, you could run it by yourself. So go do it.
The following weekend.
Following weekend. Exactly.
I had an athlete years ago that would, her self-talk and her run would be this internal banter of, and one of the things she would say is, what would Coach Brian say? So we had this WWCBS. Yeah. It was it was a little hashtag that we joked back and forth. And so actually I've been sharing it with my current athletes just most recently and saying like, what would Coach Brian say? So like take the 10,000 foot view of yourself as the athlete running, and you would say like, what would Coach Brian tell me to do right now? And Coach Brian would say, this or that, right?
Yeah. And when you look at self-talk, and look at motivational self-talk, so there is some research on using the coach perspective, or you're crushing it. I had one athlete say to me the other day, she's doing the Great Divide race this weekend. And she said, it's like, I just imagine you saying you're crushing it. I said, that's it. That is motivational self-talk. So there's research on that says that works really well. I've actually looked at other research that says, well, in some situations, it doesn't really work any different than any other stuff. But still, here's my deal with self-talk is use what works for you. It's like, it could be, I'm strong. I started using I'm strong in this marathon, and, God, it helped. It was like, I was running this marathon. My legs were just trashed. They're burning. And I'm like, you're strong. I'm strong. I got this, and that helps, but you could use it from the coach's perspective, which helps a lot of people. You could use it from, the self perspective, whatever works. I think it's Rachel Entrican who just finished, who won, outright, Cocodona. I think I'm trying to remember what she said to herself is totally different, but it worked, right? Why not me? That's what she said. She said, why not me? She said, why not me? That's a different motivational statement. Why not me? Yeah, let's go for it. That motivational statements, as long as it's working for you and you buy into it, that's how it works. And then the instructional self-talk, stand tall, get your hips underneath you. Okay, fast feet. Okay, let's focus on that next aid station right there. The next, for Leadville, those little, I'd always focus on those little glow sticks down the trail. Get to the next glow stick, or I'll take my watch and I'll go, okay, let's go 3 clicks on the watch. Let's go 3 clicks. Okay, run 3 clicks. Okay, wait, we got a little bit more. Let's go a couple more here. Run 3 clicks. Instructional self-talk. That keeps you going. So powerful, but fluctuating between those two things. I don't know how we got over here, but talking about the self-talk is so powerful.
Yeah, I love it. I notice some of the things that you talk about sometimes, or have used in the past, the term of unhooking. What is it to be hooked, and how do we unhook? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's a idea in acceptance commitment therapy of, so being hooked is what we call cognitive fusion. You're fused with a thought or feeling or sensation or emotion, and maybe you're telling yourself, I suck. Just really, you're fused with it and you can't get that, or I'm not going to finish. I'm not going to get this done.
I can't do this.
I can't do this.
I didn't do enough work to be here. I don't belong. I'm an imposter.
You're cognitively fused with this. And so you're hooked like a fish. And, and I use the example, I did javelina this fall, and my calves got so insanely tight. And, and I had run all 4 laps. I didn't stop at all. Didn't sit down. 4th lap, I'm sitting down. I couldn't get back up. And and partially is I really couldn't get back up. It was like I couldn't straighten my legs, but I could, and someone came over and he helped, he massaged my legs, and he said, okay, we're going to get one leg up, we're going to get the other leg up, and you're going to lean on me and we're going to walk, and I stumble and trip, and I was like, wait a second, I've got 8 hours left. I could do 20 miles 19 miles in 8 hours easily. So I all of a sudden, just noticed, I noticed, named, normalized the feeling I was in. And then I made this choice of doing what matters. All right, next 20 miles, gel, water bottle, gel every half hour, water bottle every hour, and we'll go. And we'll keep one foot in front of the other. And that was doing what matters. Somebody at about mile 15 was sitting on this bench, and she just sat down. She said, this is so nice. And I just, nope, I got to do what matters. So unhooking is cognitive diffusion. So we're defusing from that stuff that's hooked us. And some of the ways to do it is, is just first of all, naming it, acknowledging that you're hooked on it. Once we start acknowledging it, we're getting perspective on it. And, we're getting a mindful perspective on it. We get a viewpoint, and all of a sudden we start to have choices. When we create that space, we start to have a choice. So when you have a cross-country runner and they're getting fused with this, I can't make it. Have them just notice and name it. It's like, all right, now once you start noticing, naming it, normalizing it, because everyone else around you is feeling the same way. I guarantee you, going up from Winfield to Tapahoe Pass, everyone feels like shit. And that's normalizing it. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's keep doing what matters. Let's put as much effort into that as we can right here, right now. So you see what I'm saying about the cognitive diffusion? It's unhooking. Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like the diffusion part of it maybe is a little more, it's maybe not a separate emotion. Maybe it's more action based, right? Like, all right, I'm going to take out the trekking poles and I'm going to start grinding up this climb. And accepting it maybe more, maybe it's a little more.
So the diffusion part, let me just interrupt. It's really mindful. You're getting perspective on it. So we could have the thought, we could experience the thought, we could experience the emotion, but we could also have perspective and notice I'm having the thought and notice I'm having that emotion. Once I notice it, I'm starting to get perspective of it. So I'm no longer the chess piece. I'm getting a perspective on the chessboard. I'm getting the 10,000 foot view of it. That's the diffusion. Now we make a choice and take action and do what matters. And so I like to think about it, and we go back to acceptance commitment therapy, is we look at, if we could look at as be present and be present with our thoughts, our feelings, emotions, and be present right here, right now, where we are, where our feet are. Open up. So open up to that, to that discomfort. So we're diffusing and we're also accepting. at the same time. We're diffusing from that emotion and accepting and opening up to it. And then over here is doing what matters, which is an action aligned with our values and how we want to show up today. So it's actually taking 6 corners and bringing it into 3. So, but I like cycling through those 3 because it's really easy to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a smaller wheel, right? I mean, in general.
Exactly.
Yeah. What is the biggest myth or misconception that recreational ultra runners believe when it comes to sports psychology?
So first of all, it is thinking, and here's where it kind of gets blended in and gets that
Sure.
It is all about your past, and we're going to be therapizing you. And, and we're doing, because when someone comes to me, sports psychology has these different layers. Some people, if you go on and get a clinical doctorate, then you could become a clinical psychologist and you could become a clinical sports psychologist. A clinical sports psychologist can also deal with mental health and mental performance. Now, over here is, the sports psychologist who's got a PhD is just dealing with mental performance. So when they come into a sports psychologist, and this is a lot of how we've miscommunicated, I think, in that it's, you're going to therapize me. We're going to talk about my mom. No, we're not. Unless you want to talk about your mom, then I'll come over here and we'll talk about, I'll be my therapist. We'll do therapy here, but over here, when we're going into mental performance, we're dealing very specifically with mental performance, how I want to move through the Leadville 100, how I want to, address motivation, how I want to, maybe I need to deal on, I'm having struggles with self-talk and I'm quitting early, a lot earlier. I'll work with a lot of people who they quit and then they go, they DNF and then they go, wow, I had a lot, and I had a lot more in me. I realized that the second I had my chip cut. And I realized I could have kept going. How do I keep going? And so I'm moving through, that's where, I think the misconception is all going to be about therapy. And sure, if you want to do therapy and kind of mental performance, you can do that with someone who's licensed like me, or you could just do the mental performance piece, and understand where, it's not going to be about your mom and dad and everything else.
Yeah, there's a stigma.
There's a stigma attached. There's a mental health stigma attached to it. And that's where we run into problems. One of the nice things in sports psychology, in mental performance and in applied sports psychology is that they're really trying to help destigmatize it. So as almost like a gateway to, hey, let's also deal with the mental health piece too. And thinking of it as proactive versus reactive. When we're dealing with mental health, we're dealing kind of more reactively. I like to deal with things proactively as much as I can. Did that make sense?
Totally. And I think like part of the, like, it's both directions. It's top down and bottom up.
Totally.
To destigmatize this, because I think of the New York Yankees and like they are, just as an example, because I'm a Yankees fan, but just as an example, but like they have like a whole team that just deals with this one niche space in the world of their mental performance and how they're dealing with it. And they talk as a team as a whole, then they talk individually as groups or specific to what they do, like outfielders or infielders or, and then they have one-on-ones. Yeah. Pitchers. Yeah. The whole thing, obviously. Yeah. But, and so like they're using it to the best of their advantage as opposed to like thinking of it as like therapy. Right.
Right. Exactly. So they're doing that. And so most of those people are hired as mental performance consultants. So they're CMPC, certified mental performance consultants. They've got that master's level, typically a master's level. Some of them have gotten a doctorate level, which means typically they've done more research is what it is. And it's not necessarily a mental health degree. That's kind of the, a big distinguishing feature there. So they're certified mental performance consultants. They've gotten that degree. They've gotten 400 hours of, athlete contact and mentorship, and it's all rolled into that. And they're out there working with the baseball players, the football players. It was amazing. Probably about 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, Seattle Seahawks were working with sports psychologist Michael Gervais. And he was both clinical and mental performance. And it seemed to take off from there. It's like people were saying, look at Michael Gervais. He had this great podcast, and it's really he's really warm, friendly, but he took a long time to get there, but then it exploded. Every it's so awesome to see that every, major league team has a mental performance. They have mental health. The only challenge is you still have in collegiate teams, maybe one mental performance consultant for like 500 people, maybe one mental health person for 500 people. It's not enough. We need more. We need more accessibility, and it needs to be front and center. And because it's still sometimes taken as a grain of salt. It's like, well, yeah, we'll kind of put a little bit into this. So
I have a personal question here.
okay,
Well, it applies to me, but
okay,
I think others can get out of it too, is where
okay.
I'm trying to go with it.
You're on the clock. You're on the clock. No,
I recently
you're on the
clock in. Yeah, bill me. Go ahead, send me the bill.
I'll send you the bill.
I had Haglund's deformity or removal surgery 10 weeks ago on my right heel. Did not detach the Achilles. Only was able to peel it back just 10%.
Okay.
And get behind it and clean it up and all around it and put it all back together. I did a 5K last week, 2 5Ks, walk run. I did a 5K last night, walk run. I got about 100 miles on the bike last week, so I'm getting there. I'm really coming around. This is 10 weeks. Will be in a couple days from today. I'll be at 10 weeks, so I'm just shy of 10 weeks. The doctor okayed me to start doing weight training. He said maybe not the running. The running kind of simulates a lot of plyometrics that we know, single leg stuff. He said, let's get in the gym and get you strong before we start applying the spring forces to that Achilles. And I said, that's fine. I get it. But my question is, what does the physiological rehab process look like in dealing with the fear of re-injuring myself and the identity loss that I have from being sidelined? Like the doctor says I'm okay to do these things, but like even when I was out walk running, I was like, man, will it go again? Will I feel that pain again? Like I'm hesitant already.
Yeah.
And I'm just at the beginning stages of it. And so I thought, gosh, if I got you on the call, I might as well ask my question. Well, shoot my shot.
And,
here we go.
And this is, and really applies to everyone is, first of all, some people will say you have to be also, I want to say psychologically ready to return to play, return to sport. And when I do that, when I think about that, I like to think about things in terms of a gradual progression, gradual exposure, and just and we're doing our repeats. What can I trust myself with today? And we're going to be opening up to that experience. Yes, there is when we're injured, there's also this identity loss. There's a mental health injury. In fact, I have this Instagram post that's probably going to come out in the next day or so that I just, I think I just put that together the other day. So maybe I put it out the other day.
I'm here for it.
I can't remember if I did or, when I did. I'm like putting these things together and they're in the queue, But, really, we have this is acknowledging it first is that, mentally, there's part of me that's holding back because this hurts and I don't want to go through this again. This is a trauma. It's not necessarily in the big T, but it's a big T enough. It's a big T enough, And so just being open to that and acknowledging that. And then we start, again, normalizing the experience. It's like, you're not alone there, Brian. I mean, it's like it takes, do I trust this foot? Do I trust this knee again? Can I do that? And maybe it is taking that run walk like you did, that 5K. So, okay, how'd that feel? Okay, I did that. Let's try this next one. Maybe we'll go a little bit longer here, and it's this gradual progression and return to sport. It's also, you might even working through some of the self-talk, it's like, what does this look like for me? I've got this, you've got this, you're strong. Your doctor says you're strong, but you have to believe it, and that's where that, and going back to this, doing what matters, taking action that's aligned with your personal values. So you're not going to go and hammer out 100 miles this week. You're going to, something that's probably aligned with your values is, maybe, doing that, breaking up that 5K, breaking up, a 10K, breaking up a 20K, how do you do that? And as you do that, all of a sudden that loud noise that you experience is going to be like a passing billboard on the highway. If you think about some of this stuff, and this is where another kind of mindful technique for people to use is think about it like a billboard. This hurts. It's going to pass by. Watch the billboard pass by on the highway. As you're driving down I-25 or I-70, back this way or back towards Leadville, you see the billboards. Okay, it's just passing by. It's passing by. Open up to it. Yeah, this hurts right now. And it has been getting better. And so what's that next step? So there's a lot of little things that I would do, and I can't like throw everything at you, but
Sure.
that'd be a whole session or two. But but again, it's a process, and knowing that it is okay to not be ready to go, and that it will take the time, and to experience it, and have that gradual progressive overload, right? And then you'll get there. So
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. It's funny. It's totally okay if you haven't listened to our show, but it's a great segue with your billboard analogy, because the final question that I usually ask a lot of our guests is about a billboard. You have a billboard at the edge of your town, and it speaks to your community, and you get to write your message on it. What's your message to your community?
Be present and do what matters. Yeah, be present and do what matters. I mean, that really, a lot of it comes down to that. If you're really, really present with your thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, and you're doing what matters, and you're leaning into those values, how you want to treat yourself, how you want to treat others and the world around you, that's how you're going to grow. And if you're present with that, you're going to be taking care of your community. You're going to be taking care of yourself. You're going to be taking care of the world around you. So be present and do what matters. I will say that, this material, comes from acceptance commitment therapy and a doctor by the name of Russ Harris, who has written a lot of fantastic books called The Confidence Gap and The Happiness Trap. And both of those books, as well as a lot of instructional books for therapists and coaches, are absolutely phenomenal to look into. So, and, I know they would be pleased that this material is being shared with the world.
Neal, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. Quick shout out to your social media handles and where the rest of our audience can follow you at.
Yeah, for my business, it's really, so in my therapy and mental performance, it's the.trail.mindset. So that's the.trail.mindset. And then you could find me at Neal, Neal Palles, Palles. Is it dot? I don't know. I can't remember. Neal Palles, at Neal Palles. And that's kind of where I put my coaching hat too. So it's try to keep everything separate, but it's so hard because my worlds really do blend together. I tell people that, depending who you are, I could say Heidi on the trail, I could wave, I could nod, or I could pretend like you're not there. Just to protect confidentiality. So it's, I'm really trying to strive to, you're going to run into me on the trails. I've run into people, that I coach and I do therapy with, on the trails and races, and it's just the way it is. But you just have to keep the right hat on at the right time. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. It was so great to have this conversation with you. We've ran in some of the same circles, just listening to your stories about Leadville and Javelina and all the other places.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll run into each other pretty soon. Maybe even at a Colorado-based cross-country race soon.
Probably. Yeah. All right. See ya.
Take care.
Thanks.